See what I can see.
Yeah, broadcast live. I'm always waiting for the 5, 4, 3.
4, 3. Well, we are on now, and welcome to our weekly chat known as Just Two Dads. As you know, for those of you that watch us, those of you that are joining for the first time, you may not be aware, we are just that, just two dads, each men who happen to work in the financial services industry, but more importantly, are parents to children with special needs. And we just have general conversation about things that mean a lot to most everybody, but especially to someone who is caring for or raising a child or caring for an adult with special needs. And today we're going to touch on the topic of estate planning, wills and trust, and especially special needs wills and trusts. And the gentleman that is joining us today is an attorney who works in that field, and we are honored to have him here with us. That is Mr. Glen Wagstaff. Welcome, Glen.
Thank you very much, guys. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you.
Good to see you, man. Good to see you.
Definitely.
This is so again, Shawn. We're like last week. We had a special needs attorney on. It was just two dads and attorney. So today we have to make it just two dads and estate planning. I'm trying to come up with some new catchphrase every time.
Yes. So Glen, we've known each other for a little bit, but I don't know that you are a member of the special needs community in terms of caring for a family member that has a developmental delay or anything. And as I was telling you, I wanted to start out with a little bit about your story and what led you to this, because anyone that is a special needs warrior, no matter how great or small, and is not traditionally a member of that community, I think it takes exceptional insight and care for people to step into that realm. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to this path.
Yeah, so originally I'm from Southern California, and I think I never imagined that I would be an estate planner. I knew for a long time that I wanted to be an attorney, but I thought I wanted to be a prosecutor, right? So I went to law school. That was kind of the career path I was on. And then
What school did you go to, by the way? Where'd you go?
I studied down at USC, and then for law school, I went up to J. Reuben Clark Law School up at BYU.
Okay,
and
fantastic.
yeah, so I was excited about my career path until I kind of got disillusioned a little bit with the criminal justice system, and I'm kind of looking around, and I was in the financial industry like you guys, right, back then, and so I had a mentor of mine sit down with me and basically say, hey, have you considered estate planning? And at the time I hadn't, and he said, you should really look into that because there's a lot of need for that. And so I did, and I ended up getting a position with the firm, and it was a good position. I was on a partnership track, and what I found was I fell in love with the concept that every family is different and that they need to plan for their futures. They need to have things in place to make sure that they're taken care of. And then as I've sitting with families and just seeing what kind of needs they have, the special needs community was just one of those communities that specifically has needs for planning. And their unique situations, and it's definitely a vulnerable sort of population that needs to make sure that they have things in place. And after sometimes in hindsight we look back and we're like, there are things that I've been involved in this community all along the way, I just didn't know it, right? So my sister is very high functioning. She has autism, right? And she's on the spectrum, and then I have my grandparents. For years, I remember, growing up and visiting with them, with an adult, with disabilities that was left. Basically, her parents passed away, and my grandparents were surrogate parents for her, right? And so they've taken care of her for years and years. And the kind of the dying wish of her parents was that that they would take care of her. And because things weren't in place legally, they weren't able to get guardianship. They weren't able to legally take care of her, but they've always been there for her, right? And so, I'm not formally a member of the community, but definitely have helped a lot of families in the community.
Yeah, we find that that's the case, right? A lot of people are like, oh yeah, special needs doesn't affect me because I don't have a child, but like maybe there's a sibling or a family member or somebody who develops, some sort of need as an adult down the road where they need some special, special care, and it's amazing how much the special needs community touches so many families around this country. It really is, actually around the world, obviously. But I was going to ask you a question. I know, Shawn, you're going to jump in there too. But Glenn, are you married? Are you married, and do you have children?
Yeah. In fact, so we had 5 kids. We had actually one of them passed away a couple years ago.
Oh my gosh.
One on the way later this month, probably.
Congratulations. Oh my gosh. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Wow.
How old, or what age ranges are your kids?
The oldest one is turning 8 at the end of the year. And then
the 5 children under 8 years old? Oh my God.
Wow.
Incredible. And now, do we freeze up there
fantastic.
a little bit? Yeah, okay, we're good. All right, we're good. I think Shawn, you may be freezing a little bit. I'm not sure if I'm freezing, but I feel like we're kind of getting staticky here.
Yeah.
So Glenn, go ahead.
The youngest one, is going to be born later this month, and then the next one up is 2 years old. So, busy.
Wow.
That's crazy.
So here's an elementary question. Most people know about estate planning, about wills and trusts and things of that sort, but for lack of a better term, and we lost Brian there, at least his camera. Hopefully you're still there, Brian. But tell me, tell people about what it means, what estate planning, if you can define estate planning, wills and trusts, the difference between a will versus a trust, the benefits of having it, and how those plans or not having those plans can affect families, especially that have members of special needs.
So that's a loaded question, right? There's a lot to go, but let me start the basics. So, the thing that a lot of us, I think, forget about is we hear this all the time. People say, well, I don't have an estate. What do I need to have an estate plan for, right? And what we don't realize is that your estate is you yourself, and you, if you're not married, right? If you don't have any kids, there's still something to protect. So regardless of how much or how little you have, it's important to have paperwork in place to make sure that you're protected, that your family's protected in case something were to happen to you. And it's really just planning around emergencies, right? If you've been alive in 2020, emergencies happen, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
So on a very basic level, right? I remember my sister was in her second year of college, and she was studying down in San Diego, Southern California, and she found herself unconscious in the hospital, right? So the hospital calls my parents, and they say, hey, do you have a medical directive or a healthcare power of attorney for your daughter? And of course they didn't. And so they said, okay, well, we can't tell you anything, but your daughter's here. And so that, and this is completely unrelated to, special needs planning. But once you're an adult, the law kicks in. And once you're 18, right, the HIPAA law prevents medical facilities from sharing your private medical information. There are other restrictions. Right. Sometimes we think it's automatic that we can intercede, that we can help for our loved ones if there's an emergency, but that's just not the case. It's not automatic. There's legal processes, and if you don't have the right documents, then it can become very complicated. Special needs families come across those things more frequently, but it's really important for everybody.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow, that's something else. Go ahead.
Again, on a very basic level, having powers of attorney, financial powers of attorney, medical directives, healthcare powers of attorney is important for all of us. But even more so once you have children, because another thing to consider is, who would take care of your kids if you're gone, right? And designating the individuals or the persons that you would want to be in that role is very important. And so, these are things that every family should be considering, but sometimes, in certain circumstances, it's even more important to consider earlier or consider for longer, right? Because the results can be worse if you don't have it in place.
And when should somebody consider, so there's a will and there's a trust, right? So those are two separate things. Like, and I get it, your estate planning is for you as an individual if you're not married, but for kids. But when does it make sense to establish a trust, and can you explain like what people see the different, like what they call this revocable trust and irrevocable trust, without getting into too much legal terminology, just some general information. Can you kind of talk about that? Like, when does it make sense for people to have that, have a trust in place, for example?
The benchmark for looking at your estate planning, everybody needs to have some basic documents, but really once you're married or when you have kids, then that's when it's more important to have a will. And the reason is because in your will you can designate, okay, who's going to take care of the minor children if something happens to you, right? Who's going to be in charge of distributing everything as part of your estate, and who's going to be the administrator. And then also, how are things going to be divided out, right? So you can designate those things in your will. But if you just have a will, your will go through probate. It's going to have to go through the court system, right? And sometimes the court system is easy to, kind of maneuver, and sometimes it's very difficult. I know you guys are in California. California is a very difficult state to go through probate in, right? It's expensive. It takes a long time. It's complicated. It can cause family problems. And so most of the time people want to avoid that. And so once you own real estate and you have kids, that's when you want to have a trust.
Got it. And then revocable versus irrevocable, what is the difference between those? What does that mean?
So basically a revocable trust is a trust that you keep all the control over. So you set it up, you can be your own trustee, you can put stuff in, you can take stuff out, you keep all the flexibility over your property as if you owned it yourself. And an irrevocable trust we would set up for the purpose of giving you some sort of protection, whether that's for taxes or whether that's for, keeping benefits, qualifying for benefits or those sort of things, or maybe for some other purpose like asset protection. But you have to give up some level of control in order to have that protection. So it's kind of a give and take. And so that's where you use irrevocable trusts is for that kind of planning.
And then there's like a third party, somebody who is responsible for managing the trust assets and activities of the trust. Is that right? Is it somebody separate from you as a...
Yeah, you nominate a trustee, and depending on the type of plan you're doing, it may be somebody else, or it may be a professional, or it may be, but it should be somebody that you trust.
Okay.
It's the word.
Yeah. Now, that the way that we work in our firm, in our business, in our industry, we try to dispel the notion that, financial planning is for people who have lots of money, as opposed to the fact that it's for people who earn money, period. The fact that if you don't have a plan for your money, regardless of how little or how much you earn, the government does have a plan for it. So what do you say to those that may be very simple people, medium income, special needs or not, as to why they should have a will or trust in place? Because there's some people that I say, well, I don't have that much, it's not a big deal. Speak, if you will, to that, generally speaking, and then how it affects the special needs community and how the special needs trust differs from everything you just mentioned, if that's not redundant. Sorry.
So let me answer by telling you a story. And this is a story. It's a heartbreaking story. I just heard it recently.
You're not going to make me cry, right? Because I cry a lot, Glenn. So don't make me cry.
So
I'll look away.
Down in Southern California, there's a young couple, right? They have 3 kids at home, young children, right? And they had grandma who had helped raise the kids basically since they were born. So they all live together, and grandma's taking care of the kids. They go out for a weekend, down south in Mexico, and then they're coming back, and they get hit by a drunk driver. Both of them die. And grandma expects that, she was taking care of the kids. She's expecting that now that her son and her daughter-in-law are gone, that she's going to be the guardian to take care of the kids and to raise them. That's what she expects. Well, when it gets to court and the judge is trying to decide who the guardian's going to be, the judge says, you can't take care of these kids. You're receiving Social Security. You don't have an income. You can't work. You're not in a situation. You live in a 1-bedroom apartment. You can't take care of these kids. So in the meantime, while they're trying to decide who is going to take care of the kids go into the foster care system.
No.
And grandma is going crazy because, she doesn't speak the language well. She's, Spanish speaker primarily. And she wants to take care of the kids, but she knows that the judge isn't going to give them to her. And one of the aunts ends up being nominated and becomes the guardian for the children. The judge decides to give the children to her because she has a good job. She's established. She's single, but she didn't want to take care of them. She didn't want to raise them. She didn't want to be in charge. But that's what ended up happening. Why? Because there was nothing in place specifying what the parents wanted. They didn't nominate a guardian. They didn't have these documents. And by the way, they didn't have life insurance, right? Because that would have solved the problem of grandma not being able to provide for the kids if they would have had life insurance. So this kind of plan is important. And sometimes it's even more important when you don't have anything. Why? Because what you do have is those relationships. And if you don't plan for them, that's what's going to be lost.
Right.
So let me ask, you're saying then, and you're not a judge, so you don't know, but I mean, as an attorney, you're saying that at least the chances of, even with no final wishes, no will, no trust in place, it's fair to say that an attorney looking at a grandmother with no income, but being the beneficiary of a life insurance policy, had the parents put that in place, could have played into her favor in them thinking that she at least had the financial wherewithal to raise those kids.
Yeah, if she would have received a death benefit from a life insurance to be able to raise them with, that would have solved the problem, because then she wouldn't have had to stay in the 1-bedroom apartment. She would have been able to provide for them financially, right? Because that was the big issue at hand. And I'm not saying that this is going to happen every time. Every judge is different. Every situation is different. This is a real life story that I've heard about that did happen.
Right.
And so it can.
Wow.
And the scary thing, by the way, because we're talking about special needs families, the scary thing is that, in the default under state law is that any interested party can nominate themselves to take care of your kids. I don't know if you knew that. If you don't have a plan, any interested party can nominate themselves. Well, when you have a special needs child, the state automatically becomes an interested party. The state thinks that they can take care of your kids better than anybody else. So they're going to nominate themselves, and they're going to say, we're the first choice. We get priority unless you've done a plan. So that's why planning is so important.
Wow. The state can't even fix their freaking freeways, on a timely basis. They're going to take care of your kids. You know what I mean? It's like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But
that's amazing. We know this stuff, but to still hear it, it's, to be reminded of it and have it from your perspective, there's a piece of me that feels like I'm hearing it for the first time, at least receiving it differently. It never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah. Glenn, talking about this just for a second in the area of life insurance, because this has come up, and I'd love to hear your perspective on it and just confirm if this is right or not. But I'm not sure what the ages were of those children. But in your particular situation, if the children are under the age of 18, they can't be named as beneficiaries, right, of a life insurance policy should something happen to their parents, right? It would have to be an adult, or in the case of a trust, it has to be the beneficiary would have to be the trustee for the trust. Is that correct?
Well, so the trust is the best option, right? Because there's something called the Uniform Transfers to Minors Act. And basically what that if you have a minor and they would receive something, then they can't own it themselves. So somebody else has to be the custodian for those funds. They have to take care of it for them, and that means that they have to report to the court every year on what they're doing with it. And we've had lots of situations where, the custodian or the guardian wants to invest the money a certain way and the court disagrees. Well, whatever says rules, right? So if you don't want to have that oversight of the court looking over your shoulder and having to report every year and, that sort of stuff, then it's best not to name them as beneficiaries. It's best to have a trust and have the money held for their benefit. Now, in the case
no, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, in the case of, a child with benefits that would be entitled to benefits, it's even more important, because you don't want them to receive the money, because that'll disqualify them from benefits, right?
Right.
And so to have a special,
they can technically be set up that way. It can be set up that way, but that's where it's important to have someone doing that, making that arrangement that knows what you just shared, and that it's not done that way, so it's not to the detriment of the child, obviously.
Yeah, and that's where the special needs trust comes in. Is the special needs trust is intended to hold the property on their behalf, regardless of what age they are, so that it won't affect their benefits.
That's a key.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Okay. What benefit is there, if any, is there to a child with special needs having a special needs trust if they're not receiving any benefits? Say they're not receiving SSI, Social Security, IHSS, or anything like that. They're not receiving any. What is the benefit to them to still having a special needs trust?
So that's a real interesting question, because most of the time, the reason that happens is because they can't qualify based on the parents' income, the parents' assets.
Right.
So as soon as the parents are gone, they are going to be able to qualify. So the question becomes, do you want them to be able to receive any benefits they would be entitled to, or do you want them to miss out on it because of the way that the plan's structured, right? So the special needs allows them to receive any and all benefits that they would be entitled to without being disqualified from those benefits because they inherited something.
Wow. Fantastic.
That's interesting.
Yeah. How well versed do you find the average person or average family to be about these things? And then before I lead into that, let me ask you, how long have you been practicing law, Glenn? Because I didn't know.
So I'm the managing partner for the largest estate planning firm in the country. So we have over 100 attorneys across the country, and we've progressed and we've grown very rapidly. I've only been practicing for 7 years, and we've been in business for about 6 years. But I think the reason that we've grown so much is because the approach we take is, number one, we focus only on this area of law, estate planning, and number two, we want to focus on the specific needs that clients have, and so we take a very niche approach to planning, right? So combined experience in the firm, we have hundreds of years, right? But yeah, I've been practicing a relatively short period of time. In that time, I've seen hundreds of cases, both good and bad examples. But I would say the average client, the average person, doesn't know very much about this, and it's not that we don't know that it's important. It's just that we don't think about it enough, or we just postpone it to the point where sometimes we postpone it until a bad thing happens, and then it's too late, right?
Life insurance falls the same category, right? Disability insurance, a lot of these things that we don't do it, we don't plan for it, and then what is it? It's some people think, well, right.
You don't fail. You don't plan to fail. You fail to plan, right?
Correct. Right. It's always bad. People think, oh, I'm 10 years too early, but that's better than being 10 minutes too late. Isn't that what they say? And I was going to ask you, so are estate planning laws different state by state, or is it a kind of a federal? Is it a federal thing? Is estate planning rules?
It's state specific, and
state specific.
Benefits are state specific too, because even though most of these programs are federal programs, but they're administered on the state level. And so you have to comply with, the program of the state to make sure that you're going to not have any problems. And that's why we have, local counsel in pretty much every state to be able to work with.
And is it tied to your residence? In other words, I live in California. Do I have to have a trust that's based in California, or like a corporation? Can I place it in any other state? Does that matter?
You can place it in any state, and you can, sometimes there's a reason to do that.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, generally speaking, wherever you're located, that's the state that you're going to, do your plan around, unless there's a reason for tax purposes or something else to do something otherwise. But generally, you want to plan in this for the state that you're in, and then if you end up moving, there's full faith and credit given to the documents you set up in any state, regardless of what state you move to.
Gotcha. But if you had a trust that was set up in California, for example, and then you moved to Texas, and that becomes your permanent residence, does it make sense to then, again, because the rules in the state are different from what you're saying, does it make sense to then transfer it to, or develop a new trust, or put a new trust in place in the new state that you've become a resident? I'm just asking these questions. I don't know if there's sort of a general curiosity.
It's a good idea to review the plan and just see whether anything needs to be changed. But there's no need to redo it generally, because the state's still going to recognize the plan that you set up. Okay. And so there may be a need to make some changes, but generally you don't have to replace
it. And again, I'm sorry, Shawn, I'm just sort of dominating the questions here. Just I'm curious.
Go right ahead.
I love this part of the law. So if you can make modifications to the trust, so obviously, as you buy and sell property, or you buy and sell assets, in the name of the trust, it's a document that continues to evolve, correct? Is it always growing and changing?
The living trust, right? Because
it's a living trust.
The living document. So yeah, you should review it every couple years and just make sure it's up to date, and make minor changes as needed, maybe major changes as needed.
Okay. And just one more time on the I get the difference between a revocable and irrevocable. I'm giving up control of my estate to some degree in an irrevocable trust. What's the reason why people would choose a revocable trust versus an irrevocable trust? Like, what's the purpose for having different forms of that? Like, what's the benefit of having a revocable trust versus irrevocable trust?
Well, it's not like people choose to make it irrevocable just because you're giving up control by doing that, right?
Yeah.
You're giving your ability to make changes. And
why would anybody do that, I guess, is the question, right? The average person would say, well, why would you give up control of your...
Because you're getting protections of some kind. So if you need it for, like, for example, to avoid taxes, estate taxes, then you need to get it out of your name, so it's not going to be owned by you, right? There's other situations where, we've had other situations where people qualify for disability benefits, not because they had a disability that that was biological, but because they were in an accident, right? And so now maybe they get a settlement check, and they're gonna be disabled the rest of their life, but it was because of this accident that happened, right? And so instead of having them receive those benefits, we actually want it owned by a separate entity. That has to be an irrevocable structure. So in order for it to be its own taxpayer, its own entity, it has to be an irrevocable structure. So we would set up, we call them settlement trusts, but basically it's a special needs trust of some kind to receive that settlement money, and then it can be used for the rest of their lives for their benefit, but it's never actually owned by them. Because it's not actually owned by them, then it's not going to affect their eligibility for benefits, and they don't have direct access or control over it. So maybe if they have impaired judgment or something like that, it's not going to cause problems. Because, by the way, I mean, a lot of times we forget about the fact that there are bad people in the world too. I mean, there are predatory companies out there that target individuals with disabilities to try to get them to buy things that they don't need. And if they find out that you have money from a settlement or from an inheritance, they come after you. And so just the fact that you're keeping that privacy and keeping it out of that direct control sometimes is a benefit in and of itself.
That makes sense. If I go to a very well-known famous case, and you can tell me if I'm right about this, but for O.J. Simpson, there was a certain amount of his estate that could not be touched by the courts, correct? Am I right about that? Was it as a pension? Was it a trust? Or what was that? How was that set up? Because that would be one of the reasons why you want to be protected.
So that's a whole other discussion. Maybe you'll have to have me back about asset protection. But basically, there are some assets that can't be collected against. And if you have your assets in an irrevocable trust, that's one way to do that. Yeah.
Okay. Not that I'm advocating, criminal activity or anything, but I mean, some people, again, if you're sued by, activity, listen, I was an officer in a public company, you always have exposure and liability, even though you have officers, directors and officers insurance to protect you. Some people like to come after individuals of companies. And so in that particular case, having a trust is beneficial because your property is protected.
While we're on the topic, let me share another story with you.
Okay.
We had a client of ours who's a mechanic, right? He works on cars out of his own garage, and he had one of his clients that needed to borrow his car for the weekend. It's a normal thing. He lets him borrow his car. He's working on his car. Well, it's a rainy day in Southern California, right? The driver tries to stop and doesn't quite stop in time, and ends up hitting a little old lady who's crossing the street. The lady
oh my gosh!
Over, hits her head, and has to have brain surgery. Right?
Oh my gosh!
The driver's car insurance paid out to its limit, 100% to its limit. The owner of the car's car insurance paid out 100% to its limit, but it was still only $500,000. So now she's coming after him for $1 million.
Oh my gosh!
Of the cost of medical treatment, right? And he's looking at possibly losing his house, losing his retirement, he's taking care of his aging parents, and he has young kids at home still. That's a scary situation. Who would have imagined, right? But those sort of things happen sometimes.
These are the kinds of stories that, by the way, people should know about. I mean, is a terrible thing to say, but people are, especially now with the pandemic, people are scrambling to find ways to make extra money and starting a new business, and don't realize that the exposure that they have, and once they start their own business, they want to make sure that they've got certain protection in place in case something like this happens. I have heard stories of people who because of a weird twist of events, a car accident or something happens, they lost all of the properties that they owned because they never put them in any kind of vehicle that protected them. So that's a great example. And isn't that crazy? Like, you do somebody a favor, you lend your car as you're working on there, and that ends up possibly costing you everything that you have. Amazing. Wow. Amazing limitations. Shawn, I've dominated. Do you have other questions? I'm sure you're like,
no. It's more than fun. I'm actually, I'm like a listener today because I'm taking it all in. Because
I'm fascinated by this. I love these things. I love these things.
Yeah, no, I do too. I do too. That's why I'm so glad for Glenn to be here, because, it's the information itself is fascinating. Anything that puts you in a position to better your life and improve it is fascinating. It's also intriguing and valuable when what we're talking about is something that is hidden in plain sight and something that everybody should know about. And again, goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is this notion about, outside of your own plan, which could be the best intentions and even the most effective to an extent. Most people think that outside of their own plans, they don't necessarily have to have a plan for their money unless they're making a lot of it. And, this is just another example of how that's not true. And, most people don't. It's just like when we talk about the rights that we have as special needs parents to children with special needs. You can fight for all your rights and everything, as you want to, but isn't it easier to fight for it if you know what those rights are and what you have access to?
I think a big part of it too is mindset, right? Sometimes we tend to think about ourselves and think about, maybe even think about our problems, and we think, okay, well, I can't do anything about it. But if you're in a different mindset, then the possibilities open up, right? And so one of the common mistakes that families will do, especially families that have, special needs children, is they'll say, okay, well, Tommy can't receive anything because if he gets money, he's going to lose his benefits. So we're just going to disinherit him. And we're going to say, Sally, take care of your brother, right? Well, that doesn't always end up in a good spot. That doesn't always turn out right?
Right.
And then you hear about these stories, another heartbreaking story, right? But we had a client of ours that he was actually, he was actually very high functioning, and he was on the spectrum, but it's difficult for him to concentrate, to be able to keep a job and that sort of stuff. And he ended up kind of being on the street because his siblings didn't know what to do with him. They didn't know how to take care of him, and they didn't have the resources to take care of him. And next thing you know, he's homeless on the street, right? And that's not what his parents wanted, but it's just because things weren't set out in a way to be able to make it easy, right? And so the answer isn't, well, we don't have anything, so we're just going to not leave them anything. If you're going to take care of your kids when you're gone, you got to plan around that, because you can leverage life insurance. You can leverage other, investment vehicles or other opportunities. You can even leverage, benefit opportunities to give them a better life when you're not there than they would have had, maybe even than they would have had when you were there.
Yeah.
And sometimes we just assume, well, it's just going to be bad on them anyway, so let's not even worry about it. But if you really want to leave a legacy, if you want to take care of them when you're gone, it should be the opposite. It should be, okay, well, we're going to put something in place. So worst case scenario, he's going to live like a king. He's not going to have his parents. He's going to be heartbroken, but he's going to live like a king, right?
Yeah. Let me ask you this, just from a practical perspective, is Shawn saying, people don't have things in place, and so oftentimes planning for the future, it's, do I do that, or do I do something else? So one of the things when it comes to trust and when the stuff that we're talking about today is cost. Like, is that a thing that's keeping people from putting something in place? Is it expensive to set up a trust? Is it, and again, I realize it, and I hate to say this, but I know many, many, many lawyers whose every single sentence starts with the same words, it depends, And I know that that's what you're going to say. It depends.
Fire bit, by the way.
Yeah, no, I get it. I know before you sign your law certificate, you have to incorporate it depends. But in general, is it an expensive process? Is it a very detailed process to set something up? Like, to give people kind of an idea of what that looks like. What does that look like?
I mean, there's varying levels of planning, but to do a detailed plan, to do it properly, you need to work with somebody who knows what they're doing. And, there's costs to doing services. But if you go back 20 years and you were sitting down with an attorney, they have to go to their typewriter and type up your plan every single time. And so
Right.
they're charging you by the hour, right? It's not like that anymore. We can leverage technology today, right? And so it's a lot less expensive than it used to be. And to get something simple in place, it may be a matter of a few $100s. To get something, reasonable for a special needs sort of plan, it's more complicated. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit more expensive, but guess what? We spend more money on our sofa or on our car than we do on these things. So, I mean, you're right that you hate the answer. It depends, but is it expensive? Well, it depends on what you think expensive is, because it's going to protect everything you own and it's going to protect your loved ones. Is it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it.
Yeah, but it's sort of like, is it a few $100s or is it several thousands of dollars, right? That's the first. And I know it's like, well, the more assets you have, the more expensive it's going to be. But I would also say the more assets you have, the cost of putting something in place is less concerning.
One of the things that's unique about us is we don't base the price on your assets, on the size of your estate. Right? A lot of attorneys do, but we base complexity. And unfortunately, you have a special needs child, your situation is more complex because your plan needs to be more complex. So it's going to be a little bit more expensive, right? If you go to an attorney and there's, we call it the smell test. If you go to somebody and they say, yeah, I'll give you a full special needs trust and it's going to be $400. Yeah, you're probably not getting what you need because it's probably not going to be done properly, right? You don't want a rubber stamped one size fits all solution. It's not the type of plan that you want to do that way. But on the other hand, it doesn't have to cost you $10,000 either, right? And so, our plans are going to average somewhere in the $2,000 to $4,000 range.
That's good.
So it's an investment, right? And we try to make it affordable. We have payment plans and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it can't be something that you just get a template and that's good enough, because in order to meet these needs, it has to be customized for your situation.
Sure, and that makes sense. And that's so I just wanted to give people a general idea of what that entailed. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and so you mentioned two to 4,000, depending on the situation, and then there's payment plans that are available. To your knowledge, how does that compare to what a typical firm would charge? Because I'll just say here that what you guys do in terms of the way you operate is not in the manner in which a typical firm would operate. So if you can't speak to that, and then in the chat we have your website up there also for people like that are curious. But speak to that as to what the difference is between that versus the manner in which a typical firm would typically operate.
So I mean, there's three solutions out there that that you will come across. There's big name firms that often will charge hourly to do their work, and in Southern California especially, you're looking at maybe $300 to $400 an hour, and you don't know how long it's going to take, right? And you don't know exactly what's being done for that work. I had my aunt hired one of these attorneys. She ended up spending close to $6,000 to do a plan. And then she had me look it over afterward, and I found places where they hadn't even replaced the previous client's name in the documents.
Oh my gosh!
It just imagine, and you look at this and you're like, I just paid her $500 an hour for $6,000, and she didn't even double check their spell check or so it's crazy, right? So I mean, on one side of the spectrum you have that. On the other side of the spectrum, you have non-lawyer companies that just sell you a template and say, hey, you don't need something complicated, just put your name in here and you're good. You don't want that either, right? So you're going to look at, the people in the middle. Most of them are, small firms or solo practitioners, and they focus on this type of planning. They know what they're doing, and that's the range that you're going to be in. The problem is that they can't compete getting their name out there in the community, so they're forced to charge more and more for their services. So, I mean, I can't speak to my colleagues of what they would charge in other firms, but I will say that we're usually about half as expensive as the going rates in big markets.
That's good.
Let me ask you this: if someone came to you and had an experience like your aunt did, is there any kind of recourse that they have? Because it seems like if you're paying, this is like if I go to a mechanic and I pay for my car to be fixed, and I guess it depends on the fine print of your bill or whatever. But if I'm paying for A and I get every letter but that, what recourse does one have legally, if any?
It's most of the time when people have that come up, they don't even know that they've been had, right? They don't even know that they had an issue until it's too late, until later, right? And then they think back and, oh, I probably shouldn't have worked with that person. But they don't do anything about it, right?
Right.
But in that situation, the recourse was, she said, well, I'm going to call her up and have her fix it, and see what she'll do. And the answer was, yeah, we'll fix it for you. We won't charge you to fix it.
Right.
But it just depends on kind of who you're working with and how they do business, right? But yeah, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is we don't, planning is not a one-time thing. It's not something that you should just do once and forget about the rest of your life. Your situation's going to change. Circumstances are going to change. Your plan may need to change, right? So when we do custom planning with a client, we want to be there for them year after year. And if they have, questions or issues, or if they just want to review things, we're there to help them review it. And there's no cost to stay in touch like that, right? You actually want to stay in touch with your trusted advisors, because in the case of an emergency, you want your loved ones to be able to call and say, hey, what do we do now? Right. And so that's why we do that. But, I think this is an area that's becoming more and more, there's more people aware of it. Can't say that most people are acting on it, because there's still over half of Americans don't have anything. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
But people are being more aware of it. And so I think, it's something that's important for people to look into, and obviously, trust who they're working with.
Let me ask a quick question. Are you, Glenn, using sort of like a digital vault for these kinds of key documentation for families? Again, we're seeing what's happening in Northern California, where these, fires, we've double the size of the last record number of acres being burned in California. Homes are being destroyed. So if anybody had, their key paperwork at home, their life insurance, their trust, are you guys proponents? And I mean, I know how I said, I think this could be an obvious question, but digital vaults where, if in the case of, like you were talking about the grandmother, the parents both pass away, how do people get notified? And is there access to this paperwork in a digital environment? Is that something that's you guys are seeing a lot of?
Every time. Yeah. Every plan, we recommend that somebody has that. And, if they don't already have it, we have a solution that we include in the plan for them.
Good.
So we closely with a company called Legacy Shield to provide that, but there are other solutions like that, but that's the one that we've chosen to kind of embed in every plan. Yeah.
Got it. So Legacy Shield offers some of those initial, simple wills and trust paperwork, and then you guys are on top of that and can do the more detailed ones. Am I saying that correctly?
Shield also just provides the portal to keep track of all your digital documents and accounts and passwords and some of those things that we overlook. I mean, just imagine if you have a special needs child that has medication, maybe they have a preferred doctor, maybe they have, some day-to-day things that you have to deal with. That as a parent, we have a client of ours that their son has epilepsy, and he has epileptic seizures, right? And he has a special machine to help him when he has those seizures. Well, it requires special training to be able to use it, and it's stored in a specific spot. That's all information. If she doesn't provide to the caregivers, and if they use it wrong, or if they're not trained with it, they can actually cause them to die, right?
For sure.
And so it's important to have that information given to whoever's going to be taking care of him. And in the case of her not being there, how would that information be passed on? So this portal allows all of those sort of things to be passed on to someone you trust in the case of an emergency.
I mean, I'm a fan. I think that the digital portal as a concept, listen, I use Dropbox for all of my business all my business files and everything. and I can access it on any device. So God forbid something happens to any of my computer, my phone, I have access to this. But I would think that a digital portal or a digital vault, if you will, is got to be, should be something that everybody's thinking about. And they're fairly inexpensive these days, right? It doesn't cost very much to actually store all of your information. But if you're a homeowner, you want the deed of your house. If you're a business owner, you want key critical pieces of information, your trust, your life insurance, all those kinds of things. It would make sense to be, I'm sort of thinking out loud that, a digital portal makes so much sense, and they're fairly inexpensive to maintain too, right? There's a monthly or an annual fee that's pretty inexpensive. Am I right about that?
Yeah, the ones that we use, it's basically, there's no annual fee. It's just a one-time included with the plan sort of thing.
Oh my God,
then
even better.
Life, yeah.
Even better.
Wow.
Well, that's great. I know that we work with Legacy Shield as a partner company, and we know you through them. But the idea that we probably are doing a disservice if we're not talking about Legacy Shield for all of our clients as well, just because of that piece right there. It's something that we should be doing more of. I keep interrupting you, Shawn.
And then,
go ahead. I'm sorry,
Glenn. It's okay. The other thing is, in most cases, because a firm will typically charge an hourly rate, if they put a plan together, your work, much like ours, you sit down with someone, you do what's right for them, not what's right for you, because that's what's right for everyone long term. You're building a relationship. Life changes come about, so changes need to be made to the plan, whether it's the financial pieces we do or the legal pieces you do. In most cases, is it not true that if you put a plan together with a firm, most outside of your own, that there's a fee to do that, basically an hourly fee, but once the plan is put together and you need to make changes, there's a child that's born that's being added to, remarried, sale of a house, whatever the case is, there's typically a fee to go in and amend that plan. Is there not?
A lot of times there's a fee just to sit down and talk again, right? I mean, think about attorneys. There's right. Have a bad reputation.
Right.
It's because, like I'd be sending you a bill for this session, right?
Right. Send it to Shawn.
Anytime you have a conversation, right, you're going to get billed for it. So that's the worry a lot of clients have, and it's well founded, right? But that's one of the reasons why we do things a little bit differently. But yeah, if you have major changes, there's going to be a cost to making those changes. It's not going to be as much as redoing the plan, but there will be a cost to it. But generally speaking, it could be done. If they're minor changes, they might not even cost anything with us. Or they may be, a minimal cost, maybe $100 or something like that to do changes like that.
Wow, that's cheap.
Unheard of. Is that not?
Yeah, inexpensive. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, that's virtually unheard of. I think what all of this comes to is that, it sounds very high end and celebrity-ish or whatever have you for a person to have a team. But one of the subjects that we had on our show, I think maybe 2-3 weeks ago, Brian, I forget, was the value of a village. And part of a village is that everybody should have a team. A celebrity has a business manager, an accountant, and all that kind of stuff. But in the areas of life, your faith, your fitness, your finance, and your family, a person should have someone that's their go-to. They go to a doctor that you trust and you have a good working relationship with them, and the doctor respects your opinion as well. Someone that does the same with regard to money. How does it work opposed to the other way around? And then the legal aspect, again, which most people think is only for people who have a lot of money, but every penny counts, and more importantly, so does every human being.
Well, let me share another story with you. So
please.
We had two different scenarios. One scenario was
and Glenn, sorry to interrupt you. You're a little lower than us. I should have noticed that earlier. I don't know if you're further away from your mic or if your volume's down.
Yeah, maybe. Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. So one scenario was we had a father who was remarried, but he had a son from a previous marriage, and now over 18, he's an adult. But he has some cognitive impairment, and he's not able to, provide for himself independently, and receives government benefits. He's part of government programs, and they have him in a group home. And we went to court for guardianship issues related to making decisions on his behalf. So you have the state mandated, caregiver that has a representative there. You have you have the case manager. You have, there's probably 5 or 6 people in the room that all say that they're there looking out for his interests. And I'm sitting next to his dad, and his dad has a differing opinion from them, but they're not listening to him. And that's the team that he had. Now compare that to the second scenario, which was another client of ours who, mom passed away. She left a special needs trust. She left it in the hands of a trusted friend who was a real estate agent, and another friend who was supposed to be the guardian, right? And so we get in a room and we're sitting down, and every person in the room had a vested interest because they cared about this lady, this individual, right? The daughter. And I was in there, right? They had their estate planning attorney, they had their real estate agent, they had their financial advisor, they had the guardian, they had another trusted friend, and that was her team. Compare and contrast that. And,
right.
If you don't have a team in place that's going to look out for your interests, that cares about you, you may end up with a team that you don't want.
Right. Wow.
It's amazing. But yeah, I know we're coming down to the, to sort of the end of our time here. I will say over the last few weeks, Shawn and I have had the privilege of bringing people on to this discussion to start to look at rounding out the village. We had Layla Luna, who's got a foundation that she set up, a real warrior about, getting out there and talking to businesses about being friendly, having a sensory sensitive, if you will, environment for families who go to these establishments and, go to a restaurant so that their kids can be taken care of, and creating awareness for that. Last week we had Georgiana Juco-Kelman, who is an attorney, really another warrior, an advocate for families dealing with the school systems and IEPs and that type of thing. And you today, Glenn, by the way, about to be a father for a 5th time, the fact that you're taking time out of your personal schedule to be here with us to talk about this, we're so grateful to you and the people that we have on this podcast. We're just 2 dads sort of talking about the things that are important to us as parents of special needs kids, special needs children. So I often get corrected. I'm grateful to you for taking the time and sharing with us, because this is just great information that people should know, even if they're not dealing with, if they have neurotypical kids, just how do they take care of their families in the best possible way, and knowing that there's somebody like you out there that truly care for these families. It's for us, it's just confirmation that we're on the right path, and we continue to bring people on. And we have your information, I know, in the chat on one of our social media spaces. I'm not sure exactly where it is, but I personally, I want to thank you for your time here today, because I think you're amazing, and this is such great information, and I hope we're going to get people to reach out to you if they need this kind of help and this kind of support. And I just wanted to say thank you. I'm honored to be part of this conversation on a weekly basis. Shawn, did you want to say something there? I kind of took over there.
Yeah, again, just immeasurable thanks to Glenn. Immeasurable thanks to those that are watching, and for everyone that's watching, share it with somebody. Share it to your page. This is immeasurable stuff. Share it, and then feel free to let us know about topics that are important to you. We're having conversations together as though we're in one another's living room, but you're there. So it's about the things that matter to you as well. And so we're going to be taking this, on a bigger scale, as far as other platforms and things of that nature as well. So I just want to thank Glenn again. Thank everyone for tuning in. We'll be back next week, and we have some great things coming up. We're really excited about it. And I want to make sure that I thank and acknowledge my warriors and partners in Thrive. My partner in Thrive in business here is obviously Brian, and my partner in Thrive at home and heart is my wife, Laura, and my mom as well. And for everybody that's watching, just remember that there's some place that needs to know that you care. There's somebody someplace that's going through something that they would trade in and snatch up your biggest problems in a heartbeat. Your biggest nightmares are somebody else's dreams. And now more than ever, this country has got a big, not even a line, but a gutter right in between both sides. And each of us has to do everything that we can to come together in any way possible, shape, or form. So thanks, everybody, and Thanks, both of you, man. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Shawn. I just want to say, Shawn, we have, by the way, just so you know, Glenn, we're across the country as well, and we've got a partner here that's not on camera, Sean Hall in Hawaii, who basically manages the back end for us as well. So we've got somebody who the only way that Shawn Francis.
Forgive me for not mentioning that. Thank you so much.
Do this. Yeah, no,
why your information is in the chat. Yeah.
That's right. Sean Hall is an amazing guy, and we're going to be continuing to support. Glenn, I've enjoyed the fact that we had this conversation. You and I don't get a chance to talk very often. I know you and Shawn talk more frequently, but I am my mind has been expanded considerably since spending this time with you, and I really, really appreciate you sharing the stories. Thank you for not making me cry, but thank you for the stand that you are for families. And Shawn Francis. Yeah, don't make me cry. Shawn Francis, I love you, and I love the partnership we have here. So let's continue to do this. And Glenn, we're going to have a lot more stuff to work with you over the coming weeks and months and years. So thank you for your partnership, my friend.
Most definitely. And best to you and your family and your unborn baby. We got you in thought and prayer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Congratulations again. Amazing.
Yes. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you guys next week.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon.